The Western is a genre defined by a place and a time. The Old West. You say those words and two images immediately come to mind. The cowboy and the landscape of the American frontier circa the late 1800s. The wealth of stories, not just from America, but around the globe, mythologizing these two elements, cannot be calculated. In Hollywood's golden era, the Western achieved the peak of its popularity. They made more Westerns than any other type of film, to the point where they might have a new one out in theaters every single week. Most were made quick and cheap on studio backlots, and yet some of these films rose to such quality and influence that the genre formed the cornerstone of the American cinematic style. Today, I want to talk about a film and a filmmaker who started the genre on its path to becoming an art form. This is 100-Year-Old Movies. The Bargain is a 1914 Western film directed by Reginald Baker and starring William S. Hart. It tells the story of Two-Gun Jim Stokes, a thief who changes his ways after he falls in love. Hart, who was 50 at the time he made this picture, and looking exceptionally young for his age, had refined his Western character on the stage for years before going into films. His typical character was a bad man who turns good and seeks redemption. He was old friends with Thomas H. Ince, an actor turned director who by this time was running the West Coast productions for the New York Motion Picture Corporation. In 1912, Ince bought a ranch in Santa Ynez Canyon, California, and turned it into a production studio for the company. This was no mere office. It was practically a town set up for making movies on a scale that hadn't been done before. Keep in mind, only a few films had been made in Hollywood at this point. This would be the first studio to have all the means of production in a single location. That includes stages, set dressing, prop storage, film processing labs, offices, and anything else they needed. The commissary would serve hundreds of workers every day. Ince brought in a whole troupe from a Wild West show in Oklahoma consisting of around 300 actors and an entire tribe of Sioux Native Americans along with hundreds of horses and livestock. These stock performers lived on the ranch, while the stars would come in from LA or other locations. It sounds incredible, but listen to this section from Catherine LaHoo's book, Pacific Palisades, Where the Mountains Meet the Sea, where she writes, Ince invested $35,000 into building stages and sets, a bit of Switzerland, a Puritan settlement, a Japanese village, beyond the breakers, an ancient brigantine weighed anchor, cutlass men swarming over the sides of the ship, while on the shore performing cowboys galloped about, twirling their lassos in pursuit of errant cattle. The main herds were kept in the hills, where Ince also raised feed and garden produce. Supplies of every sort were needed to house and feed a veritable army of actors, directors, and subordinates. The whole operation was affectionately called Inceville. When Hart saw this, he became enamored with not just the creativity, but the whole lifestyle at the ranch. He soon convinced his old friend to help him make a feature western that would help him bring his stage persona to the screen. Now, they could have made the whole thing right there, but as grandiose as the Inceville studio was, Hart had something bigger in mind. That something bigger was the Grand Canyon. Hart's ideal was to film westerns in the West, to really showcase the landscape and what it meant to American culture. Location shooting gave his films a realism and scale that other westerns made up until then hadn't quite yet achieved. Audiences saw the difference. This was no Bronco Billy two-reeler. This was art. From his first feature, Hart was on his way to becoming the biggest Western star of the silent era. The story begins with a bit of purple prose glorifying the landscape of the West and man's connection with it. Essentially a thesis statement for his creative intent. It also echoes the lyrics and sentiment of America the Beautiful. The first shot is of the sun rising on the Grand Canyon. We are then introduced to our protagonist, Jim Stokes, aka the Two-Gun Man. See how he's doing this thing where he shows the landscape, then a man? If I call attention to every time this happens in the movie, this would quickly turn into a very repetitive video. I'm guessing if you've watched this far, you've got the point by now. An express agent and hipster out of time receives a message that Jim is in the area and targeting stagecoaches. As they're transporting a trunk full of money, they double the guard duty. This raises the stakes and makes the bandit character look even cooler when he pulls off the heist. Otherwise, he might appear to be taking advantage of people. How is one guy going to overcome this obstacle? Don't worry, because Jim has a plan. After all, a good thief is a smart thief. He sets up dummies behind some rocks to make it look like he's got a little gang backing him up. This resourcefulness makes us like Jim even more despite his criminal actions. It's always fun to see the underdog outwit the stronger forces, right?
This is highway robbery. Literally, highway robbery.
Jim even calls orders to his dummy gang. That bit might have worked better with audible dialogue. I'm guessing since he developed a lot of this routine on stage, this was an attempt to replicate on film a bit from his stage show. He tells his gang to keep them covered while he gets away with the money. Can't be dragging that heavy box around. In case you're curious, it's $1,000 he steals. Eventually, they get tired of being held up and jump the gang, only to discover the bandits' ruse. The coachmen figure they'll use their knowledge of the terrain to head Jim off at the pass. The chase is on. Jim starts to think he's safe, unaware that the coachmen have cut him off and lie in wait for him. His horse falls, forcing him to get away on foot. Don't forget that sack of money. Notice the dark spot on his shirt? He's been wounded. Right around the heart, too. That could be serious. Let's linger here and ponder meaningfully. Man is small, land is big. Doesn't seem like he has much hope. Enter the wandering prospector. Jim tells the Good Samaritan he was jumped by Native Americans. The standard alibi for this exact situation, which seems to come up frequently in westerns. The prospector brings him home, where his young daughter can nurse him back to health. I wonder if she'll get attached. Let's face it, there aren't many social opportunities when your dad's a prospector out in the desert. As soon as he's healthy, they get the approval of old Papa Prospector, who doesn't seem all that happy about it. Can we get some shots of sad Papa? Oh, his daughter done grown up so fast. One day you're holding a baby in your arms, and the next thing you know, she's 15 and getting married to a middle-aged man. Though for a 50-year-old, Hart could easily pass for 30 on screen, lucky bastard. Jim decides to turn over a new leaf. You know how it is, you get mortally wounded and you start seeing life differently. Start thinking it's time to settle down. Find some honest work where you don't get shot at so often. A reverend with excellent timing drops in to say hi, how do you do? Toss in a couple extra wandering prospectors for good measure and you have yourself a little shindig of wedding. Except afterwards, those two guys head into town and recognize Jim from his wanted poster. In an effort to get himself on the straight and narrow, Jim gets the stolen money together, planning to mail it back to the express he stole it from. But when he comes into town, he sees his wanted poster and figures the jig is up. Local sheriff gets a posse together, and Jim makes a run for the border. But he stops to write a note to his new bride explaining that, something came up and he had to leave town for a while. The horse knows the way home. The posse shows up looking for Jim, outing him as a wanted criminal to his new family. The sheriff tracks Jim to a border town. The bartender at the saloon recognizes Jim from his wanted poster. Isn't it great when the first person you ask is the answer you're looking for? Turns out Jim is hiding in a room over the gambling hall. The sheriff rounds up some volunteer locals to surround and trap Jim. The sheriff collects the man and the stolen money. Looks like they'll have to wait until the next stage comes through to get back home. Leaving Jim handcuffed in his room, the sheriff passes the time by playing the tables, which are rigged, so he loses everything. The sheriff then tries to recoup his losses by gambling with the stolen money, but again it's rigged, so he loses that too. Funny story, I had to pause the film here because I was legit angry that the sheriff was doing this. That made me think that audiences in 1914 might have yelled at the screen things like, "Don't do it!" And that made me think, well, if he did this scene on the stage before he did it on the screen, then did the audience yell at the live actors? The theater experience may have given Hart an insight into how audiences react to character moments and plot twists. He then brought that experience to making films. It wouldn't be the first or last time a performer did that. Maybe it contributed to his success. Sheriff then stumbles back to the room where he tells Jim, "I'm a bigger thief than you." How do you make a crook look good? Make the lawman look worse. Jim thinks it's a pretty good joke. Here, about an hour and change into the movie, is where the movie gets its title from. Jim makes a bargain with the sheriff that he'll get the money back if the sheriff promises to let him go. Is it a coincidence those wings are hanging on the wall directly behind Jim? I'm betting they did that on purpose. The sheriff is game to let Jim take a shot. Well, he does have a gambling problem, that's been established. Jim sneaks down to the gambling hall. Good thing for Jim, they keep a stash of bandit masks right next to where they count their money. It's go time. Geez, that one guy is puffing out cigar smoke like a steam train. I'll just take this and be on my way. It's a good thing they don't show his shots actually hitting anyone, then I might have to question his commitment to reform. Do a barrel roll. Did this happen every time Jim stole money? Maybe it's just easier to give up your life of crime. His next trick is to sneak back into his room without getting noticed. You know, if they had like one guy cleaning glasses behind the bar or a drunk sleeping on a bench who starts to wake up, anything to suggest he might actually get caught here, it would really add to the suspense. But no, he just makes it back to his room without any problems. I guess we had to wait for Hitchcock to figure out how to make tension out of scenes like this. The guys looking for him have the same strategic tactics of the stormtroopers in Star Wars. They're also just as easily deceived. The next day, Jim and the sheriff ride out, and he lets Jim go free. Jim rides home. His wife is there, distressed over learning that she married a criminal. When he shows up, she backs away from him. But her love wins out in the end. Together, they ride off and make their way across the border. There's no one thing or person that made the Western genre what it is. In literature, Owen Wister's novel The Virginian is often cited, defining many aspects, including the character of the modern cowboy. The same year Hart made The Bargain, Cecil B. DeMille did an adaptation of The Virginian with actor Dustin Farnham. I've read the book and seen that adaptation, both of which I enjoyed. In 1903, Edwin S. Porter made The Great Train Robbery in New Jersey for the Edison Company. it's credited as the first narrative Western film. Its success had a lot to do with the public's appetite for Wild West material, an appetite that was already being fed by live Wild West shows featuring figures like Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley. As previously mentioned, Thomas Ince got his stock of acting crew, along with trained horses and livestock, from one of these live shows. Those had been going on since at least 1870. Along with that, Western stories had long been popular in dime novels and pulp magazines. Before that, the tradition of these stories goes back to the tales of colonial settlers. Stories of British colonies in places like Africa and India have traits similar to the Western. Any tales of people going in and settling uncharted territory, at least uncharted from their point of view, you can find these common elements. That's why setting Westerns in outer space works so well. And there are many variations, like the Northern, which are stories set in Western Canada and Alaska, with Mounties and lumberjacks in place of cowboys. That would include books like Jack London's Call of the Wild, which has been adapted many times to film. But of all these traditions and variations, the Western endures. This is because of Hollywood. Hollywood became the center of the film world in the early 20th century, and the Old West was right in their backyard. As William S. Hart said, filming Westerns in the West and sending them out to the entire world. That cemented it in our cultural consciousness. That's why you get a string of popular Westerns out of Italy in the mid-60s, or guys in Japan dressing up like cowboys. That's the influence and reach of Hollywood. In America, these films serve to connect us to our history and the land itself. In raising the artistic quality of the Western films, Hart intentionally sought to preserve that connection and share it. Mission accomplished. 2 of his films, including The Bargain, are preserved by the Library of Congress, along with other material relating to Hart. He has a high school named after him, and when he died, his ranch home was turned into a natural history museum in a park in Los Angeles. Did he dare to dream what his legacy would be? What legends he'd help create? Perhaps he did the day he arrived at Innsville and saw the massive scope of the industry that was being created in the name of film. I'm Movie Cyclops. Thank you for watching this video and supporting my endless fascination with movie history. If you have any feedback, please share that with me in the comments. I always appreciate reading messages relating to my work or the movies I discuss. If you like, you can now follow my Instagram and Threads accounts, where I post additional material. More information in the description below.